All right. So welcome back. Is anyone in the room who was not part of part one before lunch? Just want to do a level set. Okay. So in part one this morning, just to do a very quick recap, we went through what Windows Azure was. We apologize for those of you in the room who saw Craig's session on Monday, and it was a bit of a duplicate there. We just went through how Windows Azure works, how you connect to it, how you create an application, how it comes together, and how we connected to that with App Controller for a deployment point of view from System Center. In part two, we're going to focus on the monitoring and the management of that once it's out there. So I'm going to spend most of the time in Operations Manager this time, show you how we connect to Azure hosted applications with Operations Manager with the Azure Management Pack, show you how we get the perf stats coming through. I have one slide that I want to talk through, and then the rest of the session will be all on demo. At the end, we're going to have Vinay come up as well to talk about SQL Azure and how we monitor SQL Azure for those of you who are leveraging that. So monitoring Windows Azure applications, remarkably similar to the way we connect to it with App Controller. Again, it's the private key, public key connection. I'll show you what that looks like just in a sec. And the way that this works is Operations Manager on-premise connects up to the storage table in Windows Azure. Craig showed in part one how we configure the application to do the diagnostics. When those are turned on, all of that performance data and all that information goes out to that table storage, and that's where we get it from Operations Manager. So a question around monitoring applications and what the overhead is, we read all of this data from the table storage and not directly to the application itself. So from a reading of the perf stats point of view, there's no overhead, but I am going to show you how we can create a dashboard around the performance of the application as well. Again, everything goes through the Windows Azure Service API. We discover the application, and anyone in the room know Operations Manager, work with Operations Manager? Most of you? Cool. So we build a distributed application dynamically for you when we connect to it. Okay, so I'm going to show you how that builds itself out, how we discover the structure of the application and all the components, and then we start to do the health availability and then the performance monitoring as well. All of that comes down, and we can build diagrams and dashboards and so forth. This is an example of a dashboard or a diagram view where we've got parts of an application on-premise, parts off-premise. You can build all of these out. So the Azure Management Pack makes Operations Manager fully aware of Windows Azure. All of the components of the applications become objects that you can drill in and bring out to the diagram view. So just wanted to show you that's how it works, that's how it comes together, and now the rest of the time is going to be spent setting this up. So we'll move across to the demo environment. I'm going to configure Operations Manager to connect to our hosted service now. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes for all that data to start coming through. So we'll set it up and get the information coming through. Then Craig's going to show you a little bit of PowerShell and how we operate and scale the application through PowerShell whilst we wait for that data to come back. Okay, so we're going to do all this live. So I've connected to Craig's subscription now. You can see he's obviously in the Azure team because he's got lots of apps running. This Azure Perf Test is the application we're going to connect to. So we are connected to the subscription in App Controller, and now I'm going to show you what that looks like when you want to connect it to in Operations Manager. So as we connected to the subscription in App Controller, we now need to do the same for Operations Manager. The way Operations Manager does this is through the run as accounts and the certificate password in the hosted service. So the first thing we have to do is create a couple of run as accounts. The first one is going to be a binary authentication, and we'll call this MMS perf cert. And this is loading in the certificate into there, demo cert, there we go. And let's just get it distributed everywhere for speed. That is not best practice. Don't ever do that in the real world. I'm doing it for demo purposes only because it's fast. So that's loaded in the certificate, and then we need to create a run as account that is a basic authentication. Call that MMS perf, MMS cert password. This is the cool bit where you can call this anything you want. The account name is not used, only the password is, okay? And basically what we're doing is configuring Operations Manager to know here's the certificate and here's the password that goes with it, okay? MMS lowercase, right? Just making sure I got the password right. Highly secure, 3-character password. Again, don't ever do what I just did, and we're good to go. So we've now got our 2 certificates running, and we now can go and turn on Azure monitoring for our hosted service. So under Windows Azure, you can see we've got a couple that are set up already. Right-click, add new monitoring wizard. We're going to add a Windows Azure application. Now this is not in your in this list by default. We got this in the list by installing the Azure Management Pack. Okay, you can download it from download.com, Microsoft.download.com, pull in the Azure application, and this will turn up in your list. Okay, let's call this MS Perf app. We will create a new management pack to store this configuration. Okay, carry on. And now we need that URL that we configured for the application. Again, the hosted service URL. I have that in, and there is the subscription ID that Craig has provided to me. Paste that in. Actually, that's the wrong one. Subscription ID in the right field. The DNS is MMS Perf. Are we in production or staging, or both?
Production.
In production, we'll go with both just in case. Okay, now once we've configured the hosted service, the subscription ID, now we need to pick the certificate. So there is our MMS Perf certificate from the Run As account that we just created. Excuse me, got a bit your nose. And once that has figured out, MMS cert password to go with it. Next, where is Operations Manager going to get out to the internet? So what this is looking for is all of the servers in the environment that are going to do the monitoring. They need to be able to get to the internet. And if you have servers that don't have access to the internet, you can proxy it all out through a specific server. So we're just going to use our Operations Manager box. We don't need a password to connect, and we'll create that. Through that wizard, we've now configured, as we configured App Controller to talk to the hosted service, we've now configured Operations Manager to go talk to that Windows Azure hosted application. If I do a refresh, that should pop there. Takes a sec. Should turn up. One moment. The servers this is the same box that's getting used out on the application booth, so they might be doing something a bit heavy. Come on. Why is it taking so long? Aha, busy. Hey, there it is. Okay. Perf app is now there. Now that I've refreshed it a couple of times, we'll give that a chance to calm down. Now we'll go over to our monitoring, to our distributed applications. You can see the 2 that we have there already. It is now going out and interrogating this application, and it will build us out a diagram view here. So that takes a little bit of time to pop through. It may not have popped through here already. It'll be out interrogating that application. So this is going to take a couple of minutes to go out, do that interrogation, build out the distributed app. Whilst we just wait for that to come down, which we need to do before we can move to the next step, Craig's going to cover a little bit on the PowerShell, the management of the application with PowerShell. Question? Is the management pack, sorry? Yes. Does the Azure Management Pack only work with Operations Manager 2012? All management packs between 2007 R2 and 2012 are the same. Okay, so if you've got management packs that you've created for Ops Manager 2007 R2, they will work with Operations Manager 2012. Okay, and the Azure Management Pack works with both. Another question? So the question was, with App Controller and Operations Manager, it's the same app that we're connecting to.
So does that same concept work for non-Azure apps? So if I model an application in App Controller, will its model automatically be reflected?
Okay. So his question was around if you model an application in an app controller, will it turn an operations manager? I just want to change your language a little bit. App controller is simply displaying what virtual machine manager is doing. So if you take a look at app controller and take a look at an on-premise application, such as the expenses app that we've got here, 3-tier application. If you have the connector between Operations Manager and Virtual Machine Manager configured, then yes, when you deploy a service into Virtual Machine Manager, it will turn up as a distributed application in Operations Manager. And in fact, as the app deploys, you will see the elements start popping into Ops Manager in real time. App Controller does nothing except display information from other locations. Okay? App Controller without Virtual Machine Manager or a Windows Azure subscription, App Controller is a really pretty Silverlight app that does nothing. Okay? You need one or both of those things to do anything. App Controller is purely a way of getting to that information. But you are correct in that as you deploy an application using Virtual Machine Manager or App Controller to Virtual Machine Manager, it will turn up as a distributed application. And if we take a look at those distributed apps, you'll see the pre-prod version that we have deployed there. We can open up the diagram view for that, and you will see, as this populates, that same structure that you saw in App Controller for the service template is going to be displayed here. You can see the tiers of the application. If we drill into a couple of those, give it a chance to. That's interesting. Oh, there it is. Just a bit slow. So you can see that we've got a couple of front tiers. This is actually the app that we scaled out this morning in the keynote. So you can see we've got a couple of tiers there coming through. So that, sorry? Yep. No, it's kept in sync. So as the app changes in the real world, that diagram will update itself. Same as in Windows Azure. If we take a look at one of these diagrams that's already up there for one of the Azure apps that is already populated, you'll see that same structure. And if we were to go and, I'm having trouble clicking, if we were to go and scale this, then you would see additional instances pop here as well. Once it's configured to talk to the app, and Operations Manager is configured to talk to Virtual Machine Manager, from that point on, it's all automatic. Okay? No problem. That's good. It's a very good point. So there's the MMS perf app has now popped in there. It's not monitored, so it's now discovered the app. It's starting to build that out. Okay? So I'm just going to cut back to Craig to do his PowerShell bit, and then we'll come back and finish off the configuration of this and build out some dashboards.
Cool.
You for?
Yes, please. So what I'm going to show you right now, what I didn't get a chance to show in the first session is the Windows Azure portal. And this is the web-based interface to Windows Azure that allows you to actually push your apps, monitor those things to some extent, and do things like switching between staging and production, seeing how many instances there are, changing some config values, etc. So this is the Windows Azure portal. And I've got a subscription here which has a whole bunch of hosted services or applications running in it. And the one that we're looking at here that we're configuring to do our monitoring on from SCOM is the MMS perf test app here. And you'll see I've actually got it running here in a staging environment, and I've also got it running in a production environment. And what I want to do now is I'm going to actually go ahead and use the PowerShell commandlets to scale that application. So as you can see in the portal itself, we've got one instance of the application running here. There's only one web role, and it only has one instance. So this is that hierarchy that I showed this morning. If I want to actually run the app, you can see here I can just go ahead and click on that. It's mmsperf.cloudapp.net, and it's just a simple ASP.NET web app, default out-of-the-box ASP.NET web app. And if I want to scale that app, I have a couple of different options. In the portal itself, I can go and click this configure button, and that's going to basically load the XML from my config file that I shipped up when I published my application. I published that package in that config file. So I can actually go modify this config file and change the instance count to whatever I want. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to use our PowerShell commandlets. So here I've got a simple PowerShell script that simply changes the role instance count. And so what I've got here is some variables. I've set up the service name, the instance count that I want. I'm going to just load that into a variable. Let's make it 10. I've got a reference to my certificate. I've got a subscription ID. So you'll see it's the same sort of information that we needed to load into App Controller and into Operations Manager in order to get authenticated and synchronized with the Windows Azure subscription. And once I have all of that, all I need to do is call the get deployment commandlet and then pipe that through to a set role instance count and pass in my variable, which is my instance count, in this case 10. So I'm going to go ahead and run this script, and it's going to take a few seconds. And it came back, and so now when I look at this, in a few seconds, you're going to see this refresh, and it's going to start spinning up those additional instances in the web app. We're also going to be able to see that in-app controller. So when we flip back over, yeah, this takes a little while to refresh. I think it actually refreshes quicker in app controller. So if you want to flip over, Adam, let's take a look at that.
Okay. Let's go and see if Craig's script worked. So is there somewhere, Craig, while we bring that up, to find those PowerShell commandlets for Windows Azure?
Where to find the commandlets?
Yes.
They are on CodePlex. So if you just Bing Windows Azure PowerShell commandlets, the first response will be the CodePlex site.
There we are. Running transition, instance count 10. Your script worked.
All right, good. Something worked.
Okay, so just doing that as a little filler while we wait for this. If we do a refresh, let's see whether this has come back. It hasn't quite come back. Let's have a look and see what the diagram view looks like. It does take a little bit of time just to get all that information, send it down. No, we've just still got the base. So whilst we wait for that to populate, we'll just see if it's coming down here, and if not, we'll jump to a pre-existing one. What we will see in Windows Azure as it populates down is it starts to pull back all of those roles that we were talking about. Craig's just scaled that one out so we get to see what the path looks like. You can see the GUID here as well. And as all the different levels of that Azure deployment come down, we get to see what does the data starting to come down, the hosted services starting to come down. If I just widen those out a little bit. We'll get all the individual roles that are running within it. These are the worker roles and the web roles that are running in those apps, as well as the state view of the application as well. Excuse me. So all of that will come down. Now, in the Windows Azure Management Pack, there is also the performance folder, and you will get nothing in this folder unless you turn diagnostics on for your application. Okay, so if you just create a basic application out of the box and don't call the diagnostics modules, don't configure them to dump that information out to the table, you will get no data in the performance counters here. Okay, so it is something that you need to do in your Windows Azure applications. Call the diagnostics profile, call the modules, have it export that information out to the table storage so that we can read it. So I think this is going to take a little bit more time than I really want to spend waiting for this. So we're going to jump over to the other environment and jump to one that just disconnected by the looks of things. So you're going to let me back in. I might need to remote back in. All right. That one up? That doesn't look good, does it? All right. So whilst we wait for that to come down, we'll jump ahead a little bit and start taking a look at how do we monitor the performance of our application. So once we know the health, once we've got that structure there, we know whether we've got an availability monitor if you want. We've got green traffic lights. Is it up? Is it down? Is it really on or off? That's basically the information that we're getting right now. One of the things these are the counters that we ran in the keynote this morning when you saw the dial and we talked about the availability of an application versus the performance of the application. We're going to do the same thing as we showed in the keynote this morning. These are the transactions that we're running to create that, but this time we're going to do it against Windows Azure. So the transaction monitor allows us to run synthetic transactions. For those of you that know Ops Manager, I don't mean to teach you to suck eggs on this one. These are running transactions through the app. Now the trick is to simulate as close as you can to an end user state. And simply hitting a website doesn't really call the application code. It loads the front page up and that's great. That's good for availability. So the first thing we're going to do is a web transaction monitor, and we'll call this MMS perf app availability. We'll put it into that same management pack that we called earlier. And now, if I go and take a look at the websites, we've got our standard app. We're going to load up the front page. And I didn't need HTTP at the front of that. Actually, is this going to work, Craig? Let's see. Have we got DNS? No. We had this problem previously. Can you do a lookup for the IP address? Sorry, we're having some DNS resolution issues on the show LAN that we're running on here, so this is not a normal thing. We're just going to cheat a little bit.
168, 62, 20, 51.
That should work all right. Taking a while. The show LAN was giving us some trouble earlier. Yep, there we go. Okay, we're back. So we're just going to cheat a little bit and use the IP address of the website rather than DNS. That's a situational issue here at the event. So again, now we get to choose where do we want to do this from. And what we showed you in the keynote this morning for the performance is we were running that performance test from multiple parts of the environment. And so here we get a list of all of the managed computers we have in Operations Manager, and we can run that simulated transaction from wherever in the environment we want. So you could run it geographically dispersed, different business units, different data centers, however you want to do that. And the idea is that you run transactions from different parts of your environment to see whether there is a problem from a specific part of the network. It brings in, is it slow from Australia but perfectly okay from Europe? Is it slow in Chicago but okay from New York? It's trying to work out where the problem actually lies in the event that something goes wrong. We'll just do a simple transaction, again, from the Ops Manager server and create that. Now you can see we've got the run query every 120 seconds, so every 2 minutes it's going to poll that service, and it's going to say, what result did I get? I'm going to show you how we go into the details of that once we've created a couple of these. Now as that's saving, for those of you eagle-eyed in the audience, we also have the second URL as well. And this one is Craig has coded into the application a slow query where we're going to simulate something being wrong with the application, something wrong with the code. And so when we make this call, we can delay or get a delay out of the environment to say, simulate being 10 seconds of lag for whatever reason. Okay, this could be a code issue, this could be a network issue. Just for the purposes of the demo, we're going to deliberately slow this down. So let me just bring that back up. Busy, busy. A little bit of lag in my demo environment right now. Boy, come on. What's it? Yeah, I know. There we go. Okay. I just want to go and get that IP address again. So in the configuration of the editor, I just went through a very basic wizard where I said that's what I want to run. What we also have, for those of you who don't know Operations Manager too well, is the ability to get HTTP status codes, different content matches, and different criteria. And you can raise alerts out of Operations Manager that says, if this happens, do something about it. Okay. Now in this case, for the availability, we purely just want to get that threshold back. We're going to be more worried about the time of this rather than the code that we get back. So I just want to take a copy of that IP address. Sorry, I didn't see what that question. Is there prescriptive guidance on the management pack? So what I'm showing you is not out of the management pack. This is just standard Operations Manager. So the management pack itself is fairly simplistic. Where is the app? And go and get the information. The best practice guidance would be configuring the application to give the diagnostics information up. I would need to look to Craig to answer that question. Okay, so let's take that. We're going to have to cheat a little bit here.
The specific information that actually gets recorded, which performance counters you want to see, the CPU, memory, all the utilization metrics, that needs to be configured inside the app, so it's on the developer to understand what performance counters are available in Windows Azure to report. And then the application actually is going to collect that information and then ship that data to Windows Azure Storage once the buffer is full every few minutes. and then SCOM will come along and pick those up. But it's a development task to actually instrument the app appropriately with the counters that you want.
So I'm just creating that slow, the slow URL, same configuration, but this time we've got the delay of 10 seconds in here. So this is purely for demo purposes. You wouldn't typically have a URL that works this way, but we just want to simulate that. We can detect that things are running slow. We can see the difference between the availability monitoring coming back and the slow. So whilst we wait for this just to load up the web page, have the 10-second delay, it's going to take the time of loading the application. It's saying, are you sure? Yes, that's fine. Simulating a lag in the environment. Once this is finished completing, then we'll configure the watcher node, and then we'll get on to creating the dashboard that actually exposes this information. It's great that you get information into Ops Manager, but we've put a lot of effort in 2012 to making sure that it's easy to expose the information and easy to delegate out and publish that. So we'll go through the creating of that dashboard. Let's just run that from Ops Manager again as well. Create that up. So we now have 2 synthetic transactions running. One is just hitting the application to say, are you alive? Did I get a response from you? Yes, great. Then a second one is running a transaction through the environment. So the one that we showed in the keynote this morning, we were hitting a web service and passing some data to it. Inside that transaction, I'm not sure if you saw it, but there is the opportunity to record a browsing session as well. So when you are creating these synthetic transactions, you have the ability to either manually type in the command, the URL, which I just did, or hit record. And what record will do is take you through, you go launch the URL, launch the website, click on the buttons in the transaction, and it will capture everything that you do. That wasn't very good English, was it? Everything that you do. So all of the HTTP gets, all the HTTP posts, all the information coming back, the URL strings that you pass through. So all of that information gets recorded. So we've created the synthetic transactions, and something that is new, and oops, here we go. Sorry, I just opened that up. Okay, closing it down. Okay. So now that we've got the 2 synthetic transactions coming through, we now need to set what our service levels are that we expect for the application. And we do this through a new component of System Standard 2012 called service level tracking. And service level tracking allows us to define exactly what we expect of our applications. The dashboard that you saw this morning with the little dial at the bottom and the availability and the transaction was built on this. So I'm just recreating that same dashboard, but for Windows Azure, and this morning we showed you an on-premise. So we'll call this again our MMS Perf app. Click Next. It's going to ask us which we want to target. Now, we want to choose all and search for MMS. And now we get all of the components of Operations Manager that have the string MMS in it. We are going to pick the first one is going to be the Performance Manager's Watcher group. So this is going to be all of those synthetic transactions that we created are in what is called a Watcher group. And those are all of the transactions that relate to this application. So we're going to start with that one. We're going to click Next, and now we get to specify what our service level objectives are. And you can think of SLOs as the thresholds that are expected of the application. We have 2. One is the collection rule, and one is the monitor state. So for the monitor state, we want to do the availability. So this will be the MMS app availability. We want to use that same group. That is fine. And we can now drill in and see from the availability. Sorry, I need to select now that we've selected the watcher group, I want the exact transaction. So I want the perf app availability, and now I will be able to drill down into that web request. Okay, and we expect our service level, we want a positive response of that transaction 99% of the time. So this is 2 nines of availability. Now we want to take a look at the collection rule, and this can be our MMS perf performance. Again, we're going to select our synthetic transaction, but this time we're going for the performance one. We're going to select that. And we have configured the response time. And we want an average, we got a slow of 10 seconds, didn't we? So let's just go for anything less than that. Let's say that we expect that transaction to take 7 seconds. So This is the one number that we can't tell you. Okay? How long should your application take to perform this transaction? I can't tell you how long that is. It's going to depend on your app, on your environment. But this effectively is your service level agreement. We expect this transaction to take less than 7 seconds on average to complete. Now, we've deliberately said we're going to do 10, so we should be breaking that quite nicely. Now we've configured 2 service level agreements inside our service tracking. We click Next, Finish, and it's going to create those objects. We're building up all the way from deploying the app, monitoring the app, running some transactions through it to make sure it's okay. Now we're setting service levels, and now we can build a dashboard based on all of that. Okay, so it's building blocks all the way up. As Craig's application came down through a structure, we are also building these applications up. So we'll give that a chance to, it's going to refresh now. There it is. Okay, the service level has been created. So let's go and see whether we are seeing our application in Operations Manager now. Not quite seeing that information coming down quite yet. That internet was a little bit slow, so I suspect that it's just taking a bit longer than expected. Yeah, not quite ready yet. Okay, let's create, do I have an MMS Perf app folder? I do. Let's create a new dashboard. And that's how hard it is to create a dashboard. Right-click, New Dashboard. We have a number of dashboards in Operations Manager. You can create a standard tile layout, grid layout. We have a service level dashboard, which is what we're going to create. The summary dashboard is what used to be called the top in count dashboard. In previous versions, it was in the beta. It dropped for the release candidate, and it's back in release the RTM version. So this is the RTM version of the app. The summary dashboard gives you the top 5, top 10 issues, runs all those transactions through. We're going to do a service level dashboard because we want to be able to see whether we're meeting transactions. MMS Perf app. Now it's going to say which of those service level objects do we want. We've got 2. We just created an MMS Perf app. Click OK. For the last 24 hours isn't going to help us so much because we only just deployed. How long has the app been deployed? A while? 24? Okay. Let's see how we track over the last 12. And create. So what's going to happen is as all these performance metrics start to come down, Operations Manager is going to move all of this information into the data warehouse. And once it's in the data warehouse, then all the number crunching takes place. Ops Manager is going to take all the data that's coming back, take all those transactions that are coming down, all the information that's available, and start to number crunch all of this against the numbers that you plugged in. So as Operations Manager runs those synthetic transactions, it's going to measure each time. So it runs it every 2 minutes. It might take 7 seconds, 8 seconds, 9 seconds, 7.5. Takes all of that information and starts to trend it over time. So here we can start to see that dashboard coming back. At the moment, we've got the availability one. It's started to pull back that. It's run a couple of times already in the last couple of minutes. And we're tracking at 100%. We've only run it a couple of times, no surprise there. What will happen as the other transactions come in is we'll start to see what the performance looks like. So we've asked for a target of 99% of availability. So we've obviously got that. We haven't taken the app down, so we're not breaking that yet. And this one will be blank. And what this will look like, exactly what it will look like, if we take a look at the service level dashboard that you saw in the keynote this morning, other than once the information comes down into the Perf app, we'll see it there too. Interesting, last night at midnight, we had a power outage here at the event. We really did. That's not fake. The power went out for the whole building down in here in the keynote area. So we can actually see that our servers went down at 11:30 last night. It's actually 11:30, not 12:30. We really did have a power outage. So that's what happens when you have service level dashboards that we had a target of 99%, and thanks to the guys having a power outage backstage on the keynote, we didn't actually meet our SLA. So we ran the keynote off the backup rig because that managed to stay up. But what we're going to see in the transactions, and this one's coming back down as well, is the target will be, I think we set it to 7. We're going to see a response time north of that because we've got the slow fatigue coming through, and all of those transactions are going to come in over time here. Okay, so that's simply, there's many different dashboards that you can do. The summary dashboard that I was talking about is the top in, and the performance levels coming through. So you can do all of these dashboards regardless of what you're monitoring. And so from a Windows Azure point of view, with the simple configuration of the management pack, the configuration of the hosted service URL, the certificate and the password, all of that information starts to come back. You can just build standard dashboards out of the box like this. You can publish them out, allow people to see them through the web console, allow them to publish them out to SharePoint, and all of that information starts to come back regardless of where your application is running. So I'm going to close off there. We've created all of that. We'll come back to this at the end. Hopefully we'll have run enough transactions to be able to simulate that over time. And also the information hopefully will have finished caching for our application in here as well. It does take 10 or 15 minutes to come down. So any questions on any of that? Did it all make sense? Not quite so scary as it might have seemed at the start?
You create a template to assign SLA across a number of instances? Is it aggregate?
So the service, the question is, can you create a template, you meaning for those service level objectives?
Yes. Across multiple instances.
Yeah. So, oops, I went to the wrong one. If we take a look at those service level tracks, each one of these is a set of parameters that get grouped together. So they are created individually, but anything inside that. So we created those 2 transactions. You could create more and more and more, and each one would turn up as a line item on their dashboard. So you can have multiple service level objectives. And in fact, if we take a look at that dashboard, we've got a couple there as well. If we take a look at how we configured that dashboard, we could change that to just being, oops, my apps. And instead of just that one, let's add in the expense one as well for the last 12 hours and finish that up. It's not quite a template, but it is a logical grouping of things together. So that's as close as we can get. Now what's going to happen as this refreshes is we're going to see 2 applications on the left-hand side and all the service level objectives that go with them. It's just going to take a sec to figure out what's going on with life. Correct, you could group them all together. And also when you start to look at the deployment of the service template and how everything's come together, being able to monitor at the service level, all of this information also goes across to Service Manager. And so Service Manager, here we go, it's just popping up now. So you can see that you get the top one and the bottom one. So it's not quite a template, but you can set some structure around expectations of groups of applications and then get a summary view there as well. And the screen resolution is not great here, but on a much larger screen that looks a whole lot more interesting. But at least it gets you to see what all of your applications look like. You can create multiple service levels, group them all together, bring those in. It's not quite a template, but it's fairly close. Any other questions on that? All right, I'm going to hand over to Vinay now, who's going to come and talk to you about the SQL Azure side of things and how that's going. Do you want slides? Oh, yeah, that's okay.
All right, can you hear me? All right, thanks, Adam. So Adam gave an overview of how we can use Operations Manager to look at the health of your Windows Azure assets along with your on-prem assets. So I'm part of the SQL Azure team, and I'm responsible for giving a similar functionality in SQL Azure. So quick poll on how many of you use SQL Azure today? All right. For those of you who are not aware of SQL Azure is a highly scalable and available relational database cloud service built on SQL Server technologies. There are 3 key benefits of using SQL Azure. There is no physical administration cost, which means there is no need to really install or patch or manage your databases. Fault tolerance, high availability, and redundancy is actually built into the service, and Microsoft guarantees a high SLA on those databases. You can scale on demand. With SQL Azure Federation, you can actually scale your applications to hundreds of nodes, depending on the demand of your application, at the same time giving you the flexibility of paying for your database usage as you grow. SQL Azure Federation allows you to horizontally partition or shard your database, thereby increasing your database size, which is right now limited to 150 gigabytes, to much more based on your application needs. And you can innovate faster because you can use your existing set of tools such as T-SQL, your programming AD or .NET, and really you don't have to learn any new programming language. You can pretty much use your existing skill set to connect to these databases. And there are two scenarios in which SQL Azure is really useful. One is your business applications. These are your traditional transactional processing applications, your line of business, or your backend applications. And second one, the more interesting one, are your hybrid applications. So SQL Azure can not only be accessed from Windows Azure, but you can actually access from your applications which are running in your data centers today. This makes it easier for you to extend your application to the cloud without having the need to move your data or your application all at once. So the scenario I'm going to focus right now is going to be on the hybrid application, where I'm going to talk about the investments we have done for DBAs to extend to use their SQL Server Management Studio tools to manage these databases. At the same time, how you can use System Center to monitor the health of your SQL Azure databases. So I'm going to illustrate that with a simple example. Let's say I'm part of IT department, which is managing a stock trader application for my investment banking customers. This stock trader application is actually running on SQL Server today, and it's pretty important for me to make sure that this application is highly available for my customers who are using these applications. Because of the criticality of this application, I'm looking at SQL Azure as a simple disaster recovery solution, so that in case this application goes down, I can still go and back up and restore my data from SQL Azure. And also, I could have some intelligence in my application to actually start redirecting my request to SQL Azure. So let's see what we have done with SQL Server Management Studio. So with the new enhancements we have done in SQL 2012, you can actually go and back up and restore this database from SQL Server Management Studio. Take note, this is not a transactional backup, it's actually a logical backup of your data. So let me show you how it's done. So this is SQL Server Management Studio. I can connect to my existing database like I do today, but I could also connect to what we call the Azure storage. So in Azure storage, you can actually give an Azure account, and you need to give a key. This key is very similar to, if you go back to the Azure Management Portal, this is the same key which when you create an Azure subscription, this is the same primary access key which you see here. You need to give the same primary access key in SQL Server Management Studio. So that way we can actually connect to the SQL Azure storage. So once I give this account, it will connect to my existing container which I've created. So I've created a container called demo container. At the same time, I can connect to my SQL Azure database from SQL Server Management Studio. So I can just give the SQL Azure database name, give the same authentication, and I can connect that. So in one view, your database administrator can look at your on-prem databases, your cloud databases, as well as your Azure storage. So let me take an example where I've created a database like MMS demo. This is part of my stock trader app, which I want to back up into Azure. So all I do is I right-click, I go to Task, I say Export Data to your application, and that gives me an option called Save to Windows Azure. And when I connect to it, it's going to ask me for which Azure account do I need to connect to. I say Connect, and it's going to pull up my container, which I have created. So what it's going to do is going to take a backpack of my database, and it's going to store the data into Azure storage. So if I go ahead and refresh my Azure container, I'll see that I've created a backpack. So essentially, it's a logical backup of my data. Now I can use this backpack to restore that data into SQL Azure. So I go to SQL Azure and say Import Data to your application. It's going to pop up a similar wizard, and I just connect to the same data. And it shows me the same database which I backed up. I click, and I can even pick. Now here I can say what edition of SQL Azure do you want to use. I can use a business application or a web application. So I just pick business application. And business application gives you a higher storage, which is like 10 gigabytes. So what it is doing is it's going to take the same data, backpack, and it's going to restore the backpack into SQL Azure, and you'll see the database getting created. So if I switch back to my Azure portal, the SQL Azure portal, and click refresh. It would have created the same data here. So there's a very simple few clicks. You can actually logically back up and restore your database into Azure back and forth. So you can do the same thing from Azure into your on-prem assets. So very simple, using your existing SQL Server Management Studio, you can just do this backup for you. But that's for the DBAs, but what about for IT operators? So we have actually created a management pack for SQL Azure, very similar to the Windows Azure Management Pack, to monitor the health of these databases. So let me show you what we have done. So I switch back to SCOM. So when you import the SQL Azure Management Pack, you'll see this new node called the Microsoft SQL Azure. When you expand that, you'll see a bunch of views. So the first view is your database engine, right, which is the instance. Now, before I go and talk about what we monitor, let me talk about how we discover these databases. So the discovery is very similar to what Adam showed for Windows Azure. We have actually created a similar wizard experience. So you go to administration and go to your account, and you create a run as account, which is essentially your account for you to connect to your SQL Azure database. So I've gone ahead and created an account called Stock Trader Credentials, and I also created an account for SQL Azure, which is a different database. Then I go to monitoring. I say add monitoring wizard, and you'll see this new application called SQL Azure, very similar to the Windows Azure. Once you import the management pack, you'll see this new wizard. So I go ahead and do this. I just say MMS demo. I created a new management pack. Now it's going to ask me for my SQL server name. This is the logical server name which you get as when you create an Azure subscription. So I go ahead and give this. And I pick the credentials which I want to connect. I pick the proxy agent. In this case, I'm just going to run it off my SCOM server. And once it's saved, it's going to go ahead and discover these databases, and it'll show up. Let's go back. Oops. So while we're waiting for that to load up, I already have created my subscription for an existing database, which is the same Stock Trader application, which is currently running on-prem. I've actually backed up and restored the same database in the cloud. So if we go back to the database state, you would have seen this data which is now getting discovered. I created this database called MMS demo a few minutes ago. The management pack has gone ahead and discovered the database, and it's going to show that information here. And right here, you can actually see the database size which is there for your subscription. So I've created a bunch of other databases which are part of that. And the MMS demo should be a 10 gigabyte size. So while waiting for it to refresh, let me walk you through the other set of features. So I have a simple test app which is actually going to send load to this database. It's going to simulate sample stock trades across these databases. And you can see how these perf counters going to change over in the next 10 minutes. So let me go ahead and start that application because the test is going to run for about 10 minutes. So I've already created this tool. And this tool is going to send 2,000 stock codes. And it's going to simulate the load for 1,500 users concurrently using the database. So let me just check connectivity. That's good. So I'm going to launch the test. And while it's going through, I'll walk you through all the functionality we have in the management pack. So now you can see this database size is now 10 gigabytes. This is the same database I just created a few minutes ago. The management pack has discovered the database, and it's actually rolling the health of the database. So if you go to database engine, that is a logical instance. And this is the next other database which I just used my discovery wizard to configure. It's now discovered the database instance, and now it's going to discover all the databases which are associated with that. So if I go to database instance and I look at the Health Explorer, so what exactly do we monitor? So we monitor at the server level, we monitor the availability. That means can I connect to my database? right? So that is the server connectivity monitor, which is actually looking at it's constantly going and polling the master database to make sure that I can connect to that. And if there is a timeout algorithm, if it doesn't fit in that algorithm, it will say connectivity to the database is no longer available. So that's one monitor. We also have the server health state, which is essentially to make sure is my master database up and running, because if my master is down, pretty much nothing is working, right? So I actually monitor the health of my master database pretty closely. And also, I also have a monitor which actually queries master to make sure that master can be queryable. We also have some few configuration monitor, which is kind of interesting. So this SQL Azure management pack is slightly different because we have actually a PowerShell-based runtime, which is actually doing most of the hard work of querying the data from SQL Azure. The management pack itself doesn't have any script. It's just all it's doing is it's just calling into the PowerShell runtime. So I want to make sure that my PowerShell runtime is actually configured and ready to go, because if that runtime is not there, this management pack is not going to work. So I have a special monitor for that. We also have a management pack compatibility monitor, which is actually checking the version of my SQL Azure database with the version of the management pack. So if there is incompatibility in the health model, which we're going to flag saying that, hey, you have a new version of management pack which you want to update to be compatible with the new SQL Azure health model. So we actually have a few special monitors we have written. And all the performance data is going to get rolled up under the performance view. But we also have another unique monitor called the number of databases. Because SQL Azure has a limit of 150 database per server, and you can call Microsoft and they will increase the limit for you, but by default you can only create 150 databases per logical server. What we do is we actually have a monitor which actually kind of keeps track of how many databases you've created, because if it hits a certain threshold, you can get alerted saying that, hey, you're hitting close to your threshold number of databases. You either want to federate or you want to think about increasing a subscription. So we actually track that as part of the health rollup. And as part of the performance view, we do complete rollup across all the data. So what exactly do we monitor in the performance? So let me take an example of a stock trader database. By default, if you notice, most of the monitors are disabled because we have thresholds on that, and we don't know exactly the thresholds which you want to configure in your environment, and we don't want to create noise in your data, in your SCOM environment. So we have disabled that, and as you want to, based on your application needs, you can go and enable those and set those set those thresholds. But one monitor which we have enabled is the database space, because this is something we know exactly when you want to get alerted based on your SQL Server on-prem deployment. So we have enabled the space monitoring. So we actually monitor the space, which is the free space and use space of your Azure database, and we actually have we roll it up into the health. But other than that, we also monitor a couple of other things at a session level. We monitor the total CPU, we monitor I/O, the memory, the total number of transactions, number of sessions, the network bandwidth, and also the transaction execution time. And each one has a threshold which you can use your authoring console to override based on your requirements. So let's go ahead and look at what happened to my, so it looks like this is done. So let me go ahead and look at some of the views. So I'm going to go and look at my stock trader database. That's what is going to be used. And I look at the performance view. So we're still waiting for the data to load from Azure, but essentially you can actually get the same information which I just showed you as perf counters, so you can visualize your data here. Oh, it's ran only for 2 minutes. So what we also created with respect to, so let's say you have your on-prem databases which are running your application and you have your cloud database. We have also created dashboards, for example, a hybrid dashboard, which is showing your view. The left side is going to show your on-prem databases, and the right side is showing your Azure databases. So in one single pane of glass, you can actually look at your whole application, whether they're running on-prem or in the cloud, in one single view. So the top one is showing you a health state view, and the bottom one is showing the free space for your on-prem databases as well as your cloud databases. So in this case, let me just uncheck some of them. So here, this is the same data which I've actually run that perf test. It's actually collected those metrics, and it's rolling up that information in this view. We also have a diagram view where you can actually see the same view of your cloud databases on the right side and your on-prem databases in one on the left side, getting rolled up into one view. So really makes it very easy for you to monitor both your assets which is running in cloud or on-prem in one single pane of glass. So this is so the database is now got discovered, and if I go back to my database state view and refresh it, oops, still not there yet. Still in the process of discovering. Okay, we'll give it some time and it should show up. So those are the high-level functionality which we have so far. If I switch back to my presentation, so we talked about a wizard-based discovery, which is very similar to your Windows Azure. We saw what we monitor. We monitor the connectivity at the server level, but we also monitor a whole bunch of counters, which is free space, your session level data, your transaction level data, and roll up the same information in SCOM. And we have released a public CDP. So we have a public CD which is available right now today. We released it about a month back, which you can download and start using this. The only caveat is the public CDP works only with SCOM 2007 R2. The reason why, but the demo I showed you was SCOM 2012. There was a bug which was in SCOM, in our management pack, which was preventing us from supporting SCOM 2012. We have fixed the bug. We are doing some testing, and we will very soon really update the management pack with support for SCOM 2012. So that's all I had.
Thank you, Vinay. Okay, so we'll jump back to the demo environment. One of the things that Vinay showed, and we were just waiting for ours to update a little bit, I'm just going to see whether that's updated or not, was the building of those diagrams. Let's see. No, mine isn't quite updated, but I'll show you how we can create those diagrams, and it's simply a matter of creating a new diagram view. And what this allows you to do is to create these, actually cancel that, to have a new, I don't want diagram view. Actually see my, oh yes, we can do that. Why not? New diagram view. We will create a filter that a little bit. Might be too much in there. This takes too long. The server's getting a little hammered. It's going to take too long. I was going to quickly show you how to create those diagrams. Basically, creating the diagram view, you can drag and drop out other things together. I apologize, that server's just getting smacked a little bit too hard. Okay, let's wrap up and finalize any last questions that you have. Moving keyboards. All of the slides that we went through are available for the download as well. So basically, the whole point of these two sessions was to really expose what we do with Windows Azure. It's not a scary thing. We want to empower you guys to get in the middle of the developers and the business who are probably going direct to Azure and direct to other places. You can really take some control here and still deliver a great level of service back to your developers and back to your business. You've got all of the tool sets to take control in terms of enabling them to deploy and manage in a controlled fashion. You can show them the monitoring and show them that you can see the health, the performance of not only the applications you've got on-prem, but up in Windows Azure as well. And all of the tool sets across System Center 2012, App Controller and Operations Manager being the key ones today, around getting that visibility of the apps and getting the health and performance back as well. All of the tool sets are there. They're all built into 2012. There's a lot of guidance from the Azure team around creating apps, enabling the diagnostics, the management packs for Windows Azure and SQL Azure as well. All of that is there. It's baked into System Center 2012, installing those management packs, deploying them out, self-discovery. It really is quite easy to turn that on. And so getting visibility into all that information, being able to build out views of the dashboard, build out views of your application across both. And as we move forward over the next few months and move through Windows 8 or 2012, I can say 2012, no, Windows Server 2012, the next release of System Center to come as well that will support Windows 8 and a few other things, being able to take a view across your applications no matter where they're running. And that's really what we're trying to achieve with System Center 2012. So thank you for sitting through the part 1 and part 2. Please do your feedback, prizes and so forth, and we really do want to hear what you have to say if there's things that you want to have access to. Loads of information on MMS 2012. Our contact details were on the last set of slides in part 1 as well. So please ping us if you need any help, any assistance. So, any last questions across any of the topics from the last couple of hours?
From SQL 2012 to SQL Azure.
Mm-hmm.
You're just using that as a point-in-time backup, not a constant.
No, that's a great question.
Repeat
So the question is, are we using that as a ongoing backup or is it a point-in-time backup? The answer is it's a point-in-time backup, and it's not a transactional backup. It's just a logical. You're just backing up your data. It's not, and that's an important point. It's not a transactionally. You're not transactionally backing up the data. It's a simple DR scenario. It's not I understand it's not a complete end-to-end scenario, but it's a simple way of backing up your data and then restoring it in Azure. Yeah. So there is a data sync service which is part of the SQL Azure, which allows you to synchronize this data. I don't have too much detail, but there is something which you can look up on SQL Azure side about this data sync service, which is going to do this. Do you know much about it?
Sorry. So that would be a way, if you're looking for a true kind of DR type of a way to keep a fresh, real-time copy of your data, you could use SQL Azure Data Sync to basically keep all your transactions in sync. And it's pretty easy to configure, and I can give you some more information at the booth if you'd like to stop by the Windows Azure booth.
And also, if you're interested to know about what we are doing for SQL 2012 monitoring, because there are a lot of capabilities like always on, which is for your high availability, I have a session on Thursday, 8:15, where I'm going to detailedly talk about what's new in SQL Server 2012 manageability and how System Center fits into that, where I'm going to cover always on, database mirroring, and some parts of replication and what enhancements we have done in the management pack for SQL Server. So that's another session to attend.
Great. Any more questions? Yes?
So I understand that Azure as of today does not have the alerting capability or the monitoring capability other than the service dashboard. So is this something that's going to be incorporated or applied on the Azure side for customers who do not want to deploy a System Center on-premise?
So the question was, this is an on-premise monitoring and managing Windows Azure. Are we looking to build that into Windows Azure and make it available up there? Got no disclosures to make today. I'm not going to answer the question. What I will say is that there is no doubt that cloud services has a very bright future in the technology industry. We're moving towards a service-orientated delivery mechanism. You can see with solutions like Windows Intune and Windows Advisor, System Center Advisor, I should say, Windows Intune, System Center Advisor, that we can do that. And so I think that it's fair to expect that we will continue to build that business. Cool. Any other questions?
Other questions?
Well, thank you guys for coming before and after lunch and sitting through that. Hopefully it was demystifying a little bit about Windows Azure, what it is, what it does, and how we can actually manage and monitor it. Craig's got something
There's
else.
one more thing I mentioned in the first session. Windows Azure trial is available, and I think I lied and said it was a 30-day trial. It's actually a 90-day trial, so actually gives you a little bit of time to actually get your feet wet and do something hopefully semi-interesting in the course of 90 days. So again, it's on windowsazure.com. There's a big button in the upper right-hand corner that says free trial. You click on that, take a few minutes to get set up. And if you have any questions about that or want help getting set up or need some tips or tricks, please swing by the Windows Azure booth. I'll be happy to help you out.
And we will be making available a lot of hydration information in the next few months as well. So things like the app that you saw in the keynote, we're going to make available for download so that you can try that in your private cloud. We're going to make available a bunch of Windows Azure demo apps as well. So we want you to be able to try some real apps and pull them apart, look at the source code, see how they were built, and get a feel for how to load that up and how to get the information out. So really want you to be able to see how it goes and be able to do it yourself. Thank you guys, and enjoy MMS.
Thank you.